Good morning, delegates. I'm Ruti Rajan, Deputy Editor of the Oath Legal Magazine. Dubai Chamber, PwC Legal Middle East, and the Oath Magazine would like to welcome you all to the webinar on key aspects of commercial agencies in the UAE. We've had an overwhelming response for this session and would like to thank you all for joining us today. On behalf of the Oath Magazine, I would like to thank Dubai Chamber for the opportunity to organize this webinar. As we all know, Dubai Chamber's mission is to represent, support, and protect business interests in Dubai. It remains committed to build a knowledge-based competitive economy, and that makes it able to adapt with the changes, requirements, and new rules. I would also like to thank the law firm PwC Legal Middle East, who will be sharing their expertise with us this morning. The webinar will focus on commercial agencies as one of the most common forms of business arrangements and will provide the participants with a practical understanding on key aspects of this topic. Our speakers this morning are, you can see them all on your screen right now, Partner Legal Leader and Head of Corporate, Darren Harris, Senior Manager, Nora Al Mohammed, and Manager, Victoria Carmona. A brief about all of our speakers. Darren leads the PwC Legal Services practice across the Middle East and is the head of the Middle East corporate practice as well. He acts on a range of corporate matters, including M&A, acquisitions and disposals, private equity, group restructurings, JVs, and shareholder arrangements. His particular focus is M&A and private equity transactions in the region. Nora is a senior manager and has been working with PwC Legal for over 7 years. She has worked on a variety of matters, including JVs, due diligence, disposals, and restructurings, and also in relation to general commercial matters, including agency and distributor arrangements. Victoria is a manager in the firm's Dubai practice, where she primarily focuses on the UAE and KSA geographies. She is a specialist restructuring lawyer and has considerable experience in numerous industries across various sectors such as financial, media, IT, oil and gas, and so on. With regard to the format of the session, our speakers will lead the session for the first half, and this will be followed by a Q&A session. Some of you have sent in your questions in advance. The questions will be addressed during the session as much as possible. There is also an option on the right side of your panel on both the laptop and the phone to type and send in your queries. As it is a session that is scheduled for 1 hour, we request you to send in queries that are relevant to our discussion today. We would also like to let you know that at the end of the session, a survey will pop up on your screen. Please do take a couple of minutes to fill it out. We will also post a survey link on the chat function of the platform. Kindly do fill that up before you leave the session. Over to Darren, Nora, and Victoria.
Thank you, Ruthie, for that very kind introduction and a very warm welcome to you all to our webinar. We know that in the post-COVID world that there are many webinars to choose from, so we're delighted that you've joined our webinar today, brought to you by Dubai Chamber and the Oath Middle East and us here at PwC Legal Middle East. If we've not worked with you before, just a little bit about us. PwC Legal, as you can see from the slide on the screen, is the largest law firm in the world by geography. That means we cover more of the globe than any other law firm. And here in the Middle East, we have a team of 55 lawyers and legal professionals as the only established law firm fully integrated with a Big Four firm, providing something very different in the market. As you've just heard from Ruthie's very kind introduction, my name is Darren Harris. I'm delighted to be joined today by my two colleagues, and to get their voices warmed up, I'll allow them to just introduce themselves very briefly.
Hello everyone, my name is Nora Al Mohammed. I'm a corporate lawyer within PwC, and I focus on restructuring.
Hi everyone, it's Victoria Carmona. I think Ruthie did a fantastic job introducing all of us, so I'm going to leave it there, but lovely to be here.
Thanks both. It's my privilege to introduce our session today and to cover what we'll be talking about over the next hour or so. Before that, just to add to Ruthie's very kind housekeeping points, I've got my laptop open here for the sole purpose of looking at questions as and when they come in. So do feel free to start typing those questions into the question function throughout the webinar. You don't need to wait until the Q&A section at the end. We'll start to group together those. If we don't manage to get to all of those questions, then we will follow up with you afterwards. But what we would really encourage you to do is to get in touch with us. We'd love to talk to you about any specific issues you have or any follow-up questions that you have. Ruthie mentioned that you've already raised some of the questions as part of the registration process. That's been really helpful. So thank you for those of you who've done that. We have tailored some of our content in response to those questions, and it does enable us to focus our priorities in certain areas. So thank you for those. There's also a chat function, so do comment, provide any observations, any likes, loves, LOLs, etc. In that area. I'll cover what we're going to talk about, and then we'll head off with a very quick poll, and I'll give you full instructions how to participate in that poll. But if you're on anything other than a mobile device to join the webinar, the best and quickest and easiest way will be to grab your mobile and have that nearby. We'll present a QR code that you can scan, but we'll come to that in a moment. In terms of what we're covering today, we'll kickstart with a brief overview of doing business in the UAE. This is in response to some of the questions that you raised as part of the registration process, but also it's typical of some of the inquiries that we receive in relation to commercial agencies. Then we'll jump with both feet into the commercial agencies law. We'll look at distribution arrangements, and we'll focus a little bit on terminating and termination generally in relation to those arrangements. Again, that's in response to some of the questions that you've raised and some of the inquiries that we typically receive. If we've got time, we might pause there and keep the excitement levels high with another poll. We'll see how we're doing on timing. I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver in that area. And then we'll kick into the legal pitfalls and protective measures, a really good practical part of this session. And we'll finish before the questions with some legislative developments, a real look forward, in particular in relation to changes to the FDI laws. You may have seen over the weekend of the statistics that came out of the growth of FDI investment in the UAE, up 44% in 2020 from 2019. When you think about what 2020 looked like for most of the world, that's a really, really great achievement for the UAE government. We'll also touch on Expo. Why wouldn't we? We're all excited about that. And then we'll finish with some Q&A. So let's go straight to the poll. Let's get you doing some work, if you don't mind. As I said, if you've got your mobile phone to hand, you can just quickly open the camera function and scan the QR code. It feels like we're in a restaurant ordering some pasta these days. That should take you straight to the question and not the pasta menu, unfortunately. If you'd rather open up a browser, then do feel free. I think we probably need to go, yeah, like great, we've got the code at the top if you are prompted for the code. So you should see this question. What 2 to 3 words do you think of when looking at commercial agencies? So when you think of commercial agencies, what are those 2 to 3 words? Just put a word in each of the boxes, and we should start to see a word map generate on the screen. The bigger the word, the more times that word is being put into a box. Great, we're starting to see some answers coming through. No one said pasta yet, which is a real achievement. Thank you for that. But exclusivity really taking center stage as the answers so far. We've got outdated, that's an interesting observation. We've got protected, that's very, very positive. Moving around a lot, which is testing my eyes. Exclusivity generally being the most popular answer. Termination, an interesting one. We will be covering that. Exclusivity, we will be, as I say, we will be covering that. We'll just let that settle for a moment as you all go in. It looks like we've generated a lot of enthusiasm and excitement through this poll. Yeah. Local partner documentation, absolutely critical in relation to any contractual arrangements to get those provisions right. Speak to your friendly PwC legal lawyer on that. Fantastic. I think we have got pasta. Thank you for those who've sent pasta. That it does make me feel hungry as we head towards lunchtime. Okay, great. Exclusivity, termination, marketing, really important part of commercial agencies. We've got some comments that hopefully we can address as part of this presentation. Outdated, one-sided. You know, a real trigger there for those of you who've put any of those terms into this. So just take a look at your current arrangements. We can certainly support you with that. Okay, great. Well, thank you for that. What we'll do, we'll take a snapshot of that, and when we send the slides around following the webinar, you will see a copy of that as to how you're all feeling about commercial agencies at around about 11:15. Excellent, thank you. So we're just going to do one more question, a bit of an easier one this time, just 3 answers. Yes, no, not sure. Do you feel that the law provides sufficient protection for businesses when using commercial agents? Yes, no, not sure. And we just need to refresh if those of you can't see the new question. So we've got not sure. Some people sat on the fence. That's okay. No judgments there. That's all right. I hope it's comfortable. And we've got generally a not sure. Well, that's great. We hope to provide you with some good takeaways as to how you could obtain sufficient protections. We've got 38% saying no and 6% saying yes. A real 12% saying yes is growing. A real sign that for some of you, if you are feeling that you don't have sufficient protections, it may not be the law that's the answer. It may be some of those arrangements that you have in place. We'd be happy to talk through those with you. So thank you for participating. I hope that's warmed you all up and got you in the mood to start our session today. Nora's going to start us off with an overview of doing business in the UAE and where commercial agencies fit into that. So thank you, Nora.
So we'll start with like a quick overview on and we'll start with the UAE Commercial Companies Law that states that foreign company or a branch are not permitted to carry out any commercial activities in the UAE without being first registered in the register and licensed by the relevant authorities in the relevant emirate. If any entity intends to carry out businesses in more than one emirate in the UAE, it is required to register in each emirate where they will be conducting business. The main two legal forms for entities in the UAE are limited liability companies or branches. In relation to limited liability companies, and historically, it was we know that there was a foreign ownership restriction whereby foreign investors are required to have a 51% UAE national shareholder as a partner. However, as part of the UAE policy to encourage foreign investors and to strengthen its position as an international hub, we saw in the past couple of years some changes that have been introduced to the companies law that are set to ease the 100% foreign shareholding in onshore LLCs and permit UAE branches to operate without a national service agent. And this is something that we will discuss later on under the foreign direct ownership. Further, branches and representative office are restricted in on the kind of activities that they may undertake. A branch's activities are restricted to those of the parent company, and representative office can undertake activities that are not income generating and not defined as commercial activities, such as promotion, marketing, etc. In addition to onshore entities, we have another jurisdiction in the UAE, which is free zones. There are more than 40 free zones currently in the UAE. They are special economic zones, often industry focused, and they are defined in geographic areas within the UAE. the rules and regulations governing setting up in a free zone vary from a free zone to another. However, certain aspects remain which are similar between each of them. Free zones are typically more relevant for inbound investment, and they allow 100% foreign ownership. They have this setup in free zone will also grant foreign investors 15 to 50 years period of tax holiday. As a general rule, free zone companies can only perform their activities within the free zone, and this is the drawback about it. When a free zone entity want to conduct business with onshore clients, and this is very relevant to movement of goods, then a distributor or an agent will have to be appointed to distribute these products to onshore clients. So, and this is a very smooth introduction to actually to give us some background about commercial agencies. Foreign suppliers who wish to import and distribute goods to the UAE, they usually have 3 ways to do that. One is to incorporate a company, a limited liability company onshore, where you will have the foreign ownership restriction, leave the FDI law aside for a bit. Second, and this will be governed under the company's law. Second is to have a commercial agency arrangement, which is governed by the commercial agency law, or to have other contractual arrangements such as distribution, franchise, joint ventures, and these are governed by the Civil Transactions Code. So knowing and identifying the exact nature of the agreement or the arrangement we want to have is very important, because this is the way to find the set of rules that will govern this arrangement. I will leave it now to Vic to take us more into the details of the commercial agency arrangements.
Thank you so much, Nora, and thank you so much for tuning in today. So I will be covering the legal framework applicable to commercial agencies, and it does not sound like the most exciting topic, but I'm going to try to make it as such. So the legal framework underpinning commercial agencies is based upon the statute, which is the UAE Commercial Agencies Law. As you can see from the date of it, it's actually celebrating its 40th birthday this year. And I think the fact that the UAE is turning 50 this year just shows that it's actually enjoyed quite an important spot and position in the kind of local commerce and economy almost straight away from the country's establishment. So what you can see on the screen is actually the definition of a commercial agency relationship, which is any arrangement whereby a foreign company is represented by an agent to distribute, sell, offer, or provide goods or services within the UAE for a commission or profit. As you can see, this definition is quite wide and general, and seemingly a lot of like various activities actually would fall within its scope. But in order for someone to be classified as a commercial agent under this particular law, you actually need to not just focus on the activities, but also on the kind of entity or the person that's practicing these activities. And the reason for that is because the law prescribes certain conditions that make someone either eligible or not eligible to become a commercial agent. So we're going to focus on that next. So as you can see, those conditions, first and foremost, focus on UAE national ownership requirements. So up until recently, the only 2 persons or legal persons that were eligible to qualify as a commercial agent was either a UAE national individual or a company wholly owned by UAE nationals. And as of 1st of June 2020, there has been an amendment introduced which now expands that structure by 2 additional entity types. One of them is a public joint stock company, or a PJSC, whose total issued share capital must be held at least in a 51% ratio by a UAE national. And a second structure that is now permitted under the law is a subsidiary of said PJSC. The reason for this extension was actually to support family businesses in the UAE. I will be talking about that a little bit more, but obviously family businesses having now amassed huge kind of conglomerates actually, and having various diverse companies or business lines in their groups, they were not able to seek foreign investment or even do initial public offerings before, precisely because that equity would have actually diluted their ownership in the entity that has the UAE commercial agency kind of approval, if you like. And so that would have disqualified them from enjoying the kind of statutory protections under the law. But with these changes, it is now allowed. So it's primarily to support those local family businesses. The second condition is to ensure that the commercial agencies agreement is notarized. That means it has to be executed in both English and Arabic and written format in front of a public notary. And lastly, it needs to be registered with the Ministry of Economy. Now, the last step is incredibly important. If you don't have that registration, then the statutory protection is just not available to the agent. Now, we are aware of instances where, for example, the firm principal refused to have the commercial agency agreement notarized. And in that case, the local agent is able to take the agency agreement to the court and apply for an order to have it registered with the Ministry of Economy. So it is possible, provided that everything else is met. And the commercial agency agreement needs to have a scope in relation to, or in terms of products and in terms of the territory. So the products and the specificity of products are incredibly important, because whilst you can assign, let's say, a whole line of, let's say, a brand of products to a commercial agent to distribute, you may not always want to do that, because so many different elements of that range may fall within that scope that you just need to be careful about what is it that you want to include or exclude. And secondly, you've got a territory exclusivity that is applicable for UAE commercial agencies. So the territory must be at least one emirate. Okay, so if these conditions are met, and then the commercial agency agreement is registered and is entered into the commercial register, then the agent is able to benefit from various statutory rights, and a snippet of that is at the bottom of the screen. So first of all, importation restrictions. So those products that we mentioned, the ones that are entered into the commercial register, they actually get notified to other government entities such as customs and the Chamber of Commerce, for example, upon registration. So if a third party is attempting to bring those products into the UAE, those products will be detained by customs and will not be released unless it is with the permission of the commercial agent or with the Ministry of Economy. Secondly, commission on sales. So the commercial agents become eligible to receive commission on all sales in relation to all the products in the exclusive territory of the agent, irrespective of whether or not that those sales happened by or through the efforts of the commercial agent. So that's quite a big bonus, if you like. And then thirdly, the commercial agent becomes protected against termination, non-renewal, and replacement. I'm going to talk about that in a minute, a little bit in a bit more detail, but just to give you a bit of an idea of what this means. So even if the commercial agency agreement is for a fixed period, the assumption is that it becomes automatically renewed in perpetuity. So that means it essentially remains in place forever. Okay. Now, what happens to those commercial agencies that do not meet this criteria? And I don't want to give the impression that it is not allowed under the law. Of course, absolutely, it is allowed. But if you do not meet these conditions that I've just spoken about, you will not be considered as a UAE commercial agent for the purposes of the UAE commercial agencies law. But that doesn't mean that these activities are not permitted. It just means that you are not essentially an agent for those purposes. So I just refer to them as distributors or distribution agreements, okay? So if you don't meet the criteria under the commercial agencies law, then the applicable law to you will be the UAE commercial transactions law. Okay, it has a wide-ranging kind of purview, and it does talk about contractual agencies, which is what a distribution agreement is. Under this statutory framework, there is no ownership kind of restriction. So anyone can become a distributor with the appropriate license. In terms of the scope, there's no requirement to have the agreement registered with the UAE Ministry of Economy, and the actual territory does not need to be for an exclusive scope. And finally, the form, it's interesting actually, so with contracts, of course, if you contrast that with the UAE commercial agencies requirement, it not only needs to be in writing, and in English and Arabic, it needs to be notarized. And if you take the distribution agreement kind of version of that relationship, it does not even need to be in writing, so it can be a non-written agreement as well. But of course, for purposes of protecting both parties' rights, it is highly advisable that it is in writing. So let's just turn our attention back again to the termination provisions, given that it is the probably one statutory right that tends to bring the most attention from parties interested in entering into a commercial agency relationship. So again, just to recap, termination, non-renewal, or replacing the agent is not allowed under the law, and this is again for UAE commercial agencies, again the UAE commercial agencies law. However, even if it kind of gives the impression that it's practically impossible to terminate a relationship with a commercial agent, that's not the case. The law does talk about material reasons, so termination is possible for material reasons, but unhelpfully, unfortunately, the law does not define what material reasons are. And further two reasons as to why this is a little bit difficult for us to scope is because a lot of these disputes actually tend to be settled out of court. So there's not much public knowledge that goes around knowing the kind of ins and outs of what the dispute is. And secondly, in the UAE being the civil law jurisdiction, there's no judicial precedent. So each case is decided on a case-by-case basis, and a lot of the times the judge orders an expert to look into the specifics of the case. So having said that, what you can see on the screen kind of gives us a good indication that if these circumstances were to arise, and that would comprise of material reasons. And firstly, of course, if you've got expressed terms in the agreement, which is again quite important, if the agent is not performing in accordance with those terms, then that would be arguably, that would constitute material reasons. And secondly, hopefully it's common sense. If it breaks the law, the UAE commercial agencies law in particular, then that would be a material reason too. The last 2 points are quite interesting. So the third ground for material reasons would be to do with upholding the foreign distributors or the foreign supplier products rather, their image, or even doing acts that may actively ruin the image, if you like, of the foreign supplier product. So that would be again material reasons. And lastly, competition. So if you were to compete with the products or services provided by the principal, that would actually be a material reason. If the parties were to come to a disagreement, let's say, then the first port of call for the resolution of their dispute would be the commercial agency committee, and it is a forum that is kind of like a mandatory first stop that the parties need to take their disputes to. And once the committee kind of passes its decision, the parties are able to go and pursue the dispute further in their competent jurisdiction, which tends to be a court in the Emirates, for example. So I'm just going to talk about or give a very quick example of a case, of a recent case that I believe was passed in 2018, and that included two foreign principals that had a dispute with their local commercial agent, and the actual case was settled for, sorry, it wasn't settled, but it was decided for the foreign principals on the grounds of material reasons, which is, so I'm just going to demonstrate the aspects of the case. So back in the 1980s, two foreign principals appointed one commercial agent in the UAE for the distribution of 3 brands. 2 of those brands pertain to the first principal, and then the third one was to do with the second principal. And everything went okay until about 2004, when the commercial agent defaulted on their payment obligations and did not adhere to the payment terms in terms of the period in which he had to settle the invoices for the shipment. So in response to that failure, the foreign principal sought a guarantee from the commercial agent, which was given. And given that it was already in place, the principals continued to send the shipment and regularly reminded the commercial agent that should he continue to default on the payment obligations, then a termination letter would follow. So that's exactly what happened. Fortunately, the commercial agent was not able to keep up with the payments on time, and the termination letter was sent by the foreign principals. And in that letter, they gave him like a resolution period or a notice period to rectify those breaches. He wasn't able to comply with those. So what happened next? The 2 principals took or escalated the matter to the Ministry of Economy, and the Ministry of Economy has got the right to terminate the commercial agency and also strike it out from the commercial register. That's exactly what happened, and of course the commercial agent wasn't too happy about that, so he initiated 3 administrative cases against the 2 principals, and it went actually from the court of first instance all the way to the Supreme Court, and in each case he lost, so he kept on appealing, but in the end the final decision was, which was found by I believe 3 panels of experts, that the commercial agent just committed severe breaches of the contract, which constituted material reasons such as obviously failing the payment obligations, not managing the business well, there was a lack of customer service. All of these actually led to the commercial agent losing the case, and not only losing the case, but he also lost out on compensation, which I think he wanted around 600 million dirhams, so that would have been quite considerable. So that's just one example of the possibility that it is possible to terminate a commercial agent if certain circumstances arise. And let's just look at the kind of unregistered commercial agency version of disputes and how they get resolved. So again, the applicable law here is not the UAE Commercial Agencies Law, and accordingly, the forum for the dispute is not a set forum. It's really just down to and depends on the parties' wishes as expressed in the agreement. So it could be arbitration, it could be litigation, whichever. And there's no statutory kind of framework as to the grounds on which it can be terminated, whether or not it can be terminated for cause or otherwise. What happens if the contract expires or reaches its full term? Does it get automatically renewed? So none of this is really established in the context of the statute. It's really just left to the decision of the parties as to how they want to manage their relationship. And that's obviously why it's quite important that in respect of unregistered commercial agencies or distribution agreements, the terms are very clearly expressly written down in the agreement. So that would be it. I think we're on to our call next, if we have time.
Yes, thank you for that. Thank you for that overview of doing business and the commercial agencies and distribution arrangements. As I said, we've focused a little bit on termination. And lots of questions coming in, so thank you for that. I've been keeping a note of those. I'm grouping them together. Some of them we think have been answered already, but if you feel after the webinar, as I said earlier, that you'd like to follow up on that question, we'd be more than happy to have a chat with you. And others, I think, will be covered in the next part of our presentation. So the same drill as last time. Here we've got a QR code. We'll try and leave it on screen a little longer so that you can get your mobile phones handy. If you prefer to use your browser and you've still got menti.com open, then just refresh that and put in the new code that you can see there on screen. As earlier, we are getting closer to lunchtime, but it still won't give you the pasta menu. I'm deeply sorry about that. So if we can go to the next slide, you should see a question around Expo. Very exciting development this year. If you've been to the Expo site yet and had the privilege to do that, you'll see that it's amazing. A real proud moment for Dubai. Where do you think an opportunity for commercial agents during Expo 2020? Blood sugar levels are clearly starting to drop because we've got none in big letters in the center of the screen. But we can see definitely some opportunities here. Short-term businesses, construction, sales, new technologies, lots of activity in e-commerce, and we might touch on some of that in our next section. Delivery, restructuring, seeing lots of restructuring activity in the region. Good positive restructuring, I would say, not necessarily distressed restructuring. Lots of franchising activity, agree with that. Entertainment, entry to market, lots of opportunity. I generally completely agree with that. Fantastic. We'll let that just settle for a moment, but thank you for that. Hotels, yeah, we're expecting quite a few people to come into Dubai. Great for the hotel industry, certainly been hampered over the last 12-15 months by the pandemic, so I'm sure they're looking forward to that. Fantastic, thank you for that. We'll take the snapshot as we did earlier, and we'll send that across. The next question: do you think commercial agents are here to stay? Come off the fence on this one. Do we have a yes or a no? Yes, 100% so far. That's just one person, I think. We'll let that go. So you've been taken through and hopefully got some takeaways around the commercial agencies law, some protections around termination and renewal, and if you certainly had some questions around that. So overwhelmingly yes, 70%, 67% going down. Great, okay, fantastic. We'll take a snapshot of that and I will hand back to Nora.
So I'll be speaking now about the pitfalls to avoid disputes, because I think, and maybe all of us feel like the commercial agencies, it's hard to get out of it. It comes with lots of conflicts, but in here we would like to identify some mechanisms that helps foreign investors to avoid such conflicts. We start with the contractual terms. Many agents will insist on their agreements being registered in order to protect their position. This is particularly true where the agent is expecting to incur a significant capex, such as fitting out the stores, promoting products, etc. And so requires comfort that they will be compensated for the losses they may suffer if the distribution agreement is terminated. This is a commercial point to be discussed and agreed on case-by-case basis. If an agreement is to be registered, the agreement then, from past experience, we know that a clear performance targets need to be included, and that such targets need to be clearly measurable. Without that level of detail and clarity, the principal may further be restricted in their ability to terminate such registered agreements for non-performance. Historically, it was not unusual for an agent to be appointed for a brand, often on a basis of a very short form agreement, not that detailed. This historically placed a registered agent in a very strong position to claim that they were the appointed agent for any product bearing the same or such brand name. In recent years, the trend has been developed and the principles become more involved in identifying the details of the agreement and specify products that the agent will be appointed as representative in the UAE. Generally speaking, it's perfectly legitimate for an agreement to grant an agent the right to distribute only certain products, allowing the principal the freedom to appoint other agents for different types of products. We have some instances whereby there is a considerable difference between the products listed in the agreements and those transported into the commercial agency register. Therefore, we really advise foreign investors or the principals to be more involved in the registration process, to see what exactly are the products and what the description of the products that are registered with the Ministry of Economy. Because once it is registered, it becomes a bit more difficult to change that. So the involvement from the registration process throughout the whole process is a key here. Another factor to be considered by principals and agents is that on occasion, policy decisions made by the ministry may dictate that the registration of an agency is only possible in respect of a principal's entire product range. In these circumstances, guidance should be sought from the ministry prior to the principal signing an agreement with a proposed agent. Recent discussions with ministry representatives have suggested that there may be, by virtue of internal policy decisions, require that in some industry markets or sectors, only one agent to be registered in relation to a specific manufactured products range. Example products, even brands manufactured by the same parent entity may be caught by a pre-existing registration in respect of a parent entity's other brands and products. Another interesting consideration is how a registered agent, a registered agreement is treated if there are operational changes which affect the principal entity. This is you can see that in where internal restructuring, whereby divisions of an entity become standalone subsidiaries for a group reorganization, resulting in one number of corporate group taking over the responsibility for the appointment of distributors and agent from another. We have seen in a number of occasions, more so with older registered agreements, that the entity responsible of supplying the product to the agent is not the entity that is recorded in the registrar of the Ministry of Economy. It is likely that the ministry will consider that the entity subject to the original registration remains bound by the registration and will remain so until such time as the registration is deregistered or updated by the ministry. Of course, many maybe circumstances, there will be some circumstances where this approach would not make sense, such as where the original contracting party ceased to exist. Finally, evolution of products can also cause potential ambiguity. Again, our discussions with the ministry have indicated that if an agent can prove that a new product entering the market is effectively an evolution of a later model or a pre-existing product already subject to registration in their name, then the registered agent could have a strong argument claim that they are also the registered agent for the evolution product. We'll move next to more of looking forward on impact of commercial agencies. We'll start with the foreign direct investment and the new FDI law. The enactment of the FDI's law on 23rd of September 2018 introduced the possibility of majority foreign ownership to own 100% shares of a limited liability company in the mainland. This, of course, the FDI sets a list of the negative. I would call it the negative list of 13 sectors where existing foreign ownership restriction would continue to apply. It also set the positive list where the UAE cabinet identified economic sectors and activities where up to 100% ownership that are allowed to have no restriction on UAE national shareholder were required. The foreign ownership will definitely changing the environment of the investment in the UAE, with companies now foreign investors are more encouraged now to have their 100% ownership to be able to freely distribute their products within the UAE. Of course, if their products are not restricted to restricted under the negative list, or maybe restricted because they are of a nature that should be sold with under the commercial agency model. So we think the foreign direct investment is having a real impact on the scope of application of the commercial agencies, and may limit that scope. Expo 2021, I would say, we've seen with the answers and with the big letters, none. Maybe I won't say it's really none, because the Expo 2021 will bring lots of new opportunities to the UAE in general. So part of that, of course, would be the commercial agency. Maybe if people who are coming to Expo and participating in Expo may find out that the operating model that they wish to have going forward in the UAE is more to rely on commercial agencies, especially that it is now tested and there is an awareness of what works, what not, what pitfalls have to be in place, what mechanics need to be in place to protect the foreign investors, and also to provide further opportunities to commercial agents. So I wouldn't necessarily exclude the opportunities that would come out of Expo 2021. E-commerce, e-commerce is we've seen this recently in the UAE and all over the world, and specifically after the pandemic, and all industries have to develop and enhance their digital and technology, and to try new operating models and to move to e-commerce. So it has, I think it has an impact on using a commercial agency, but not necessarily distributors, because although big retail, for example, players can have like a registration on one of the free zones in the UAE, yet they will always need a distributor to be appointed in order for them to distribute their goods to onshore clients. So there is an impact of the e-commerce on the commercial agencies, but not necessarily to the distribution agreements. I guess, I don't know, Darren, would you like to go through the final before we go to the questions and answers?
Yeah, that's great, thank you. And I would reiterate your views around Expo. I think there is a huge opportunity there, including for if you're in the business of being a commercial agent, or if you're looking to enter the market. So I do think Expo will provide a boost to business generally, and in relation to commercial agency. I completely agree with you. Let's go through some questions. We've got a great number of questions that have come through, and I've been busy trying to group them all together to answer as many as possible. Some are very specific, and so I may leave those until after the webinar, and we'll get in touch directly, as we'll need to know a little bit more information. But we will try and cover off some of these now. Victoria, we've had a few questions around the rights of agents, and how do agents protect their rights when things don't necessarily go right?
And that, I'm assuming that's for commercial agents, registered commercial agents.
That's for agents generally, yeah. So okay. There may be a distinction between the two.
Okay. Well, that's that just kind of relates to this slide that I looked at, I think the very first second slide. So number one, you must have the commercial agency agreement registered. Unless it is registered, the commercial agent will not enjoy any of the statutory protections in the law. And quite frankly, the law will just not apply to you, because again, if you don't meet those requirements, those eligibility kind of requirements, then the applicable law to you will be the commercial transactions law, which does not have any statutory protection specifically for the distributor or agent, whatever it may be. So what you want to aim for is to become subject to the UAE commercial agencies law. And the way in which you can do that is by having it registered. And of course, that depends on the prerequisites, which is the nationality requirements and the notarized agreement element, unless you go for the court route.
Okay, thank you. And Nora, lots of interest about free zones, and in particular around e-commerce. You've sparked a frenzy of activity in terms of questions on e-commerce. But on free zones generally, there's some questions around that tax holiday that you mentioned. Which of the free zones, or is it a general point around free zones that offer a tax holiday of between the 15 and 50?
It is more of a general one. So we say in the regulations in each on these free zones that for how many years it is set the tax. However, it's unclear. I believe this is what we understand from our tax colleagues. It's unclear on the treatment of such tax holidays when, for example, corporate tax is introduced in a soon, I guess, in the UAE. But I'm personally looking forward to see how the regulations of each free zone will adapt to such new taxes.
Okay, great, thank you. Victoria, I think you covered this in your presentation. We've got a number of questions on it, so maybe let's put the issue to bed. Does registration of agency agreements need the written consent of both parties?
Yes and no. So,
yes and no. Brilliantly resolved for you all there.
It depends. No, so the basic expectation is that, yeah, and that obviously arises from the requirement that it needs to be notarized in front of a public notary. So of course both parties need to be present and have it executed in front of the notary. Again, the exception to that would be, let's say, if the firm principal refuses the notarization aspect for whatever reason, it is possible for the commercial agent meeting the ownership requirements to go to the court and require or ask the court to order that the commercial agency agreement is registered with the Ministry of Economy.
And just a part two to that. Again, we've had a couple of questions that have been asking whether registration with the Ministry of Economy is mandatory for commercial agency arrangements.
Yes, because that's well, mandatory if you want to be applicable or subject to the law, right? And if you want to enjoy those rights that I just mentioned. And this is quite important, especially in the context of the products that are specified in the agency agreement, because at this point, the Ministry of Economy, as I said, would notify other departments, which will be there kind of as a protective measure, ensuring that those products that are supposedly under your exclusive territory and scope do not get imported into the country without your knowledge or permission.
Okay, thank you. And Nora, just touching on the e-commerce part of things, because it has sparked a frenzy of activity. If you're based in a free zone selling online, do you still need a distributor to sell into the onshore environment?
There's more than one option there. Yes, you will either need a distributor to distribute onshore, and that can be like a distributor or a registered agent with a registered agreement with the Ministry of Economy. And the other way to do that is to appoint a third-party courier, whereby the end customer will act as the importer of record, and the courier company will physically transfer the goods from the free zone to the end customer. So it's a different operating model. It comes with its advantages and disadvantages. So there's no one answer that fits all. So it depends on the clients, on the importation model, and many other aspects.
Okay, thanks very much for that. And just a follow-up question, Nora, in terms of the new changes around 100% foreign ownership. Do you see that as being a threat to free zones generally, and also separately then to commercial agents? How does that 100% rule change on impact free zones and agents? Quite an interesting question.
Okay. Yeah, I think as of now, because the 122, to be frank, it's the law is there. We're all waiting the implementing regulation. If you go to the authorities now, and if you have like an activity that falls under the 120 under the list of like 122 activities, it is not that straightforward to have it enforced now. We're still waiting for that to be fully implemented. However, each emirate have a different position on that. The Dubai, the DED in Dubai, they really have their own initiative in whereby they look at investors. If there's like a global investor, or not necessarily actually global, but if you have the right business case, if you have the right, if you are bringing or adding more value to the economy of the UAE, they will definitely consider that, and they will say if you can qualify for 100% ownership and grant you this. But of course, I personally, I think it is gonna be threatening the free zones, because free zones were historically part of, like, the people, investors usually go to free zones because there is no foreign ownership restriction. However, I'm not sure. Maybe the tax aspect will remain the advantage moving forward for the free zone. Maybe that can be the answer to create that balance again. But we'll still say. But of course, also the list is still like specific to certain activities. So I think the free zones will remain to be the go-to if you want to have 100% ownership for the activities that are still restricted onshore. So maybe a balance between two will continue to exist.
Still a role to play. Okay, and just final questions, just to bring it back to commercial agents. For you, Victoria, we've got lots of questions around how does a company check if a commercial agency agreement has been registered? Is there something in the public domain that can be accessed by people?
Well, you would need to check with the commercial register of the Ministry of Economy. Not sure the current status as to how public it is or how open.
You need to reach out to them, and you need to be like have the right authority from the principal to have it checked.
There's no public kind of access to it. It sounds.
No, I don't think so.
Right. So yeah.
Okay. Well, the right authorities, a third party, could potentially check on your behalf. Okay, I think we're running out of time. We have got lots of other questions, and we will reach out to you to answer those questions. But please do feel free to get in touch with us. You will have our contact details via the deck that will be circulated to you after the webinar. It leaves me to thank my colleagues, Victoria and Nora. Thank you very much. Thank you all for participating. Thank you all for your enthusiasm on the polls. It is coming up to lunchtime. I recommend the pasta. But back to you, Ruthie.
Thank you, Darren, Nora, and Victoria, for your time this morning to share insight on this topic. So it was great to see the participation from the polls as well, and also the questions coming in. We would like to thank the entire team of PwC Legal Middle East for their cooperation and support. This event, of course, would not have been possible without the initiative of the Dubai Chamber. We would like to express our heartfelt gratitude to the team of the Legal Services Department for their support. I would also like to thank my colleagues at the Youth Magazine for their efforts, especially my co-organizer, Sandhya Devakaran, for her help. Thank you, delegates, for joining us this morning. Please, as Darren mentioned, the deck will be forwarded to you. Please do take a minute to fill out the survey, which will come up on your screen, and also there's a link in the chat function as well. Thank you very much once again to the PwC legal team. We wish you all good health and have a wonderful week. Thank you.